Hey guys, welcome to another commentary done by Diggity. This is going to be a very special commentary focusing in particular on the Marauder for gosucoaching.com. If you haven't already checked out the website, or if you're not viewing this from the website, please go there and check out all the information. It's a great tool for learning about Starcraft 2, and it's really going to help out. Hopefully it will help out some of the Starcraft 2 players that want to go pro. They want to have kind of some steady income. So if you're looking to get really good at Starcraft 2 in the beta, go ahead and pay for some classes, or if you want to get really good at original Starcraft and kind of learn it maybe in preparation for Starcraft 2, check out the guys who are offering lessons there. In particular, Psionic, Reaver, Inca, and Machine. They're actually living in a house. They're working part-time jobs. They're really dedicated to going pro at Starcraft 2, so this will really help them out, hopefully. Anyway, this is, I think, patch 8. Don't quote me on that. In the beta, concussive shells have just been moved to the tech lab, so keep in mind this information might be wildly inaccurate future in the beta, depending on how Marauders are buffed or nerfed. Yeah, the concussive shells moving to the tech lab was huge, particularly for Terran versus Protoss, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on Marauders versus Zerg. Marauders really the backbone of the Terran army in all three matchups, but I really want to kind of show you applications versus kind of Zerg infantry at large, because you should see Marauders, depending on the build, from the front of the Terran army to basically the early game all the way to the late game. So in this first scenario, I'm going to show you just a flat Marauder versus the backbone of the Zerg army, a roach. Just going to run up, and you'll see that a Marauder can basically take a roach out in just about 8 hits. So if you do end up in a one-on-one situation and you are a roach, you might want to try to get out of there and save it with some zerglings, something like that. And after the fact, you have about 50 health left with that Marauder, so pretty good situation for the Marauder if you're just basically in equal numbers. So keep in mind, if you're a Terran, if you're in equal numbers or slightly larger than the roach army you're going up against, and you don't have any creep underneath, and you know that they don't have any burrow or anything like that, you can basically attack, move into them, and you know you're going to have some success. Concussive shells can also adjust that. Keep in mind that Marauders have range 6 and Roaches have range 3, and this was just a straight fight. Marauders micro extremely well against Roaches, especially if they don't have any creep or speed upgrade. You can just attack, move back, attack, move back. With Stim Pack, they can get... Marauders aren't very fast units, but with that Stim Pack, they gain a lot of mobility, and if you have a Medivac someplace nearby, they can heal them up immediately after that, or heal them up on their retreat. So overall, Marauders are very, very effective units against Roaches. And I'll kind of show you a couple applications down the line, so, particularly with the Medivacs, but first let me show you a better situation for the Roaches. So in this scenario, it's going to be a little bit more of a fair fight. You're going to have the Marauder go up against the 2 Roaches, and this isn't pure... StarCraft doesn't work like pure Mathcraft, so I don't think you can think, oh look, I've got a Roach and 2 Roaches kills 1 Marauder, so that means if I have 4 Roaches I can kill 2 Marauders. And as a Terran player, don't think, oh well, if I have 3 Marauders I can kill 4 Roaches. But basically what I want to illustrate here is if you have a superior number of Roaches, or pretty sizable superior number of Roaches, you're pretty good situation. And usually what I try to think of is, I usually want to be, depending on the number, the larger the group, the higher the number you want to be ahead, obviously. And particularly that's extremely true when you start throwing Medivacs in. But generally you want to have a noticeable larger group of Roaches to be engaging as a Zerg player. And granted, you're not going to be able to count them right on the field, but say you have 8 Roaches, then you know you're pretty well suited against like 5 Marauders. Or if you have 9 Roaches, you know you'll be doing excellent against 3 Marauders. Now keep in mind this is without any micromanagement whatsoever, and those numbers do change with micromanagement or creep or other map artifacts, but that gives you a general idea of you want to have a superior number of Roaches. And also keep in mind that even in this scenario, the Roach, yeah, I mean you have 2 Roaches left, but one of them just with 15 health, so the Marauder still pretty powerful in that situation, still with reinforcements that might be coming theoretically. If you have a very weak Roach army, if basically all of them are in the red after that, you might think about just retreating, pulling them out of there, and waiting until you get the burrow upgrade, so you can kind of burrow, heal them up, and just kind of force the Terran player into more defensive situation, because if you continue suiciding in there, you're going to lose your entire army. So kind of to illustrate that point, you've got 5 Marauders here, you've got 8 Roaches here, and you're going to kind of see the math I'm talking about here. So superior number of Roaches going against just 5. They do have Stim and Concussion Cannon. They're not really microing back, so it's just going to be a straight kind of focus fire fight here and there. And what you'll see is the Roaches manage to come out ahead, and they come out significantly ahead. You still have 3 Roaches left. Now to illustrate the point further, we've got 4 Marauders, or sorry, 4, I can count, 8 Marauders. You've got equal number of Roaches, and they're going to go head to head, and you kind of tell the difference. Now you can see some of that range playing a big effect right there, and you can also see my opponent, he moved in to get a little bit more of a micro situation, but a much more favorable outcome for the Marauders. You in fact have 6 Marauders left out of that attack grouping. Yes, there was some focus fire for the Marauders. I think there was also focus fire for the Roaches as well. And granted, you're probably going to end up with a little bit more of micro, but as you can see, when you have equivalent numbers of Marauders versus equivalent numbers of Roaches, the Marauders, even without Medivac support, completely run the Roaches over. So in this scenario, I'm going to show you kind of the impossible scenario, which I think a lot of people, when they see this, they think, oh, well, you know, infinite roaches in groups of 2 will lose to a single Marauder with a single Medivac overhead. As you can see, this Marauder can easily take this roach, and as long as it can sit here with this Medivac nearby, 2 more roaches could maybe come here on delay, and they would end up getting killed against this Marauder, and he could kill something like 16 roaches if they were just coming 2 at a time. And I think a lot of people think about Medivacs kind of like that, where they're like, oh, well, Medivacs, they make my Marauders so much stronger. When they make them last, they make them more powerful, they give them health in the middle of combat. But that's a bit of a pitfall, I think, because you really can't think of a Medivac as an attack unit, or sorry, not as an attack unit, as a defensive unit, something that's going to extend the life of your Marauder, because by the time you have your Medivac coming out, you're going to have a pretty sizable roach force, and probably maybe even some Hydralisks mixed in there. In fact, most likely you're going to be facing some Hydralisks mixed in there. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to have at least 3-on-1 situations, in which case you're going to end up losing your Marauder. Because Medivacs work great when it's these little micro situations, but as we see in this scenario, these 3 roaches will easily handle this single Marauder. So basically impact damage will take it out. And yeah, I mean, you're thinking, oh, well, they did so much better against these 3 roaches. Yes, that's true, that it will extend the life of your Marauder a bit, but what you really need to think about is the fact that large group versus large group, the Medivacs aren't that efficient at keeping your Marauders alive. They do help, especially in large numbers, but really, especially in the mid-game, what you want to think of Medivacs as is kind of a supplemental force for after the fight and in between the fight. So let's say this Marauder actually ran away, it got a stim off, and it was able to pull out with just 10 health. You pull out with just 10 health, you still have a full Marauder at the end of the fight, especially if you're able to micro it back, which means you have a full Marauder. So if you keep that in mind of like a full huge roach fight versus a huge Marauder fight, if you have 7 Marauders left and they all have 10 hit points, if you sit there with that Medivac, all of a sudden you have 7 full health Marauders, which makes them a lot more effective when the next fight along the line happens. So really think about Medivacs, particularly in the mid game, as kind of battle extenders. They're good for assaults and for attacks because they extend the efficiency of your army kind of in transition after fights, also sometimes in retreats or in between very short fights. Basically you can get, you know, that 40-50 hit points, which basically extends the efficiency of your Marauder greatly in between, you know, quick battles that are happening right there, and you're much more likely to run into the 2 roach versus 1 Marauder situation when you have those quick successive fights, at which point the Medivacs really shine. So here you have 8 roaches going up against 4 Marauders, a basic 2-to-1 ratio, and you have the Medivac overhead. As you can see, these 4 Marauders aren't going to do all that much better against these 8 roaches as they would do otherwise with that Medivac, because that Medivac, yeah, it heals slowly over time, but these roaches are doing pummel damage.